But the smallpox, yeah, that's better. The smallpox virus is actually rather nice. And the fact is that although you say that you want to live naturally and protect nature, it's not true. You don't want to preserve endangered species, like the smallpox virus, which is very much endangered. You just want to preserve the ones you think are cute. And so, why not just say that? Why not just say that there are certain things we value, and there's nothing wrong with valuing eagles, they are beautiful. And there's nothing wrong with not valuing smallpox viruses because they are horrible in their consequences. So why not say, fuck nature, I'm interested in preserving what is good and beautiful, not that it's natural. So that it's natural is absolutely no better than that it is commanded by God. Now, I'm going to return at the end to this whole question of justifying morality, because it's getting really hairy now that we find that actually nothing is capable of doing this, that every attempt fails. But first I want to say, what is morality from an anthropological point of view? And my answer is that it has everything to do with emotions, and I'm now going to explain this. As an anthropological fact, what people care about in a certain sort of way, and don't ask me exactly what the criteria are here, but I think that they're recognizable. What people care about with the kind of passion that they attribute to their moral beliefs are, as it were, can be divided into two packages, one of which is simply larger than the other. What is in common to the various packages is what I call the liberal package. In the liberal package, you care about avoiding harm and pain, and you care about justice or fairness. But most people of the world, in the world, care passionately about three other domains of things. And altogether, the 5 domains constitute what can be called the conservative package. And those 3 additional domains have to do with community and loyalty. They have to do with authority and the recognition of hierarchy. And they have to do with purity, which itself has to do with sex and religion largely, but I will qualify this and amplify it in a second. Now, here's the thesis. This is a thesis. I'm not giving you any references, etc., but if you're interested, I could give you all that stuff. This is a doctrine that arises out of research by a number of people, very recent research that is anthropological, that is psychological, and it's done by people who look at the brain, and it's done by psychologists who are evolutionary psychologists who are interested in trying to understand things as they can be understood in the light of evolution. And every domain of these 5s can then be seen to have the following 3 characteristics. The first characteristic is that the domain embodies a number of rules that people regard as moral rules, to which they ascribe an extreme importance and an authority, to which which leads them to feel guilt and to feel anger if they themselves have done something wrong or somebody else has done something wrong, respectively. Secondly, each domain is associated with a specific set of emotions which motivate us to observe those characteristic rules of that domain. So this is where the emotions play an absolutely pivotal role in every domain. But the interesting thing about these, and the way in which I think you do need to look at this recent research in order to see how plausible it is, and it certainly it's more sketchy now than I'm sure it will be in 20 or 30 years, but it's relatively new that we can actually see this as being done fairly seriously and not just being sort of speculation off the top of somebody's head. So the third idea is that there is, for each of these emotional modules or sets of emotional dispositions in a given domain, there is a plausible story that you can tell, and sometimes, in fact always, there is some evidence for the existence of that cluster of emotions in our ancestors and in our cousins, the other primates, or even the other mammals. That's the way in which each one of these is set out. So let's go very quickly through them and see how that works. In the case of harm avoidance, the moral rules are, of course, against causing harm and in favor of preventing harm, and so on. The emotional response that is characteristic here is the response of empathy. When I see somebody suffering, I feel bad. We'll get to some exceptions called psychopaths later. But by and large, normal people, when they see someone suffering, it makes them feel bad. And you can, I mean, it's plausible enough that natural selection would have instilled a mechanism for this, because obviously it helps people to get on if they actually take some sort of interest in each other's suffering, to the extent of trying to assist them. Now, specifically, the evidence that we have here is that there's an enormous amount of evidence that has come out in the past couple of decades about the way in which empathy is available incredibly early, so that these are pictures of babies imitating before you could possibly even talk to them. And this is like, I don't know what this particular picture is, but I mean, you can do this with babies who are about 2 or 3 years old, 2 or 3 days old, right? They instinctively will stick out their tongue if you stick out your tongue, and they will imitate those facial expressions. Many people think that they have, other people think they haven't, but many people think that they've actually identified structures in the brain which are known as mirror neurons that essentially fire when you're doing something and also fire when you are observing it. So the hypothesis would be that there's a complete automatic beginning of empathy here, which is simply built on the capacity of an infant to see that some person is happening, something is happening in a person. And by the way, it's completely different parts of the brain that recognize persons from those that recognize non-living things, right? So this is sort of an automatic thing that is clearly the fruit of natural selection. Okay, let's go to fairness, the second domain.